Hello and welcome to the Tideway for day 2 of the boat race fixtures that have taken place here this weekend. My name is Camilla Hadlin-Horrocks. I'm here with Grace Prendergast and we'll be taking you through today's fixtures on the commentary. Now, loads of action to look forward to today. We're kicking off first and foremost at 12 o'clock with the CUBC Women's A crew going up against the University of London, Grace.
Yes, yeah, very exciting. This is their second fixture. They were out the other weekend and racing Brooks, which I think they had some tough races but learnt a lot. So I think they'll be trying to bring that into these races and see if they can keep building towards the ultimate goal, which is the boat race. And the fixtures are just so valuable for that. You learn a lot, you take a lot away from it, and you've got these crews out there that want to throw everything at you and try and beat you on the shorter distances.
Yeah, absolutely. Big learning opportunity. And the other crews that we've got racing today are the B boat, so potentially those that might be in the reserve crews come boat race day in March. You know, they're going up against UL as well. What do you think the B boat might take from this weekend of racing?
I think it's such valuable experience for both crews, and I think in the B boat you know that you've still got the chance of making the A boat, so the ultimate goal will be them to go out there and put their best foot forward to say, hey, actually maybe there's some women or men in these B boats that want to break into the A boat. So it's important for everyone, and also just such valuable experience on the Tideway. I think Cambridge crews that have learnt a lot from the steering and all the racing last weekend, so we want to be trying to improve on that.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got that CUBC Women B boat going up at 12:20 against ULB. It's then 12:45. We then see the first of our men's crews in action. So that will be CUBC Men B, again racing the University of London. Now, again, it's a slightly different setup for the men here, in that we've got the B boat racing the University of London, and then the A boat that races just after 1 o'clock, 1:10 against a Dutch national side race. So again, it'll be interesting to see which UL crew kind of comes out to race that second boat.
Yeah, that's really exciting, because I guess obviously it's the top UL crew against the B Cambridge crew, so I think that'll be a really good challenge for them and really valuable experience racing the top crew. And then additionally the A crew gets the chance to race a Dutch national team, which is, I guess it shows the importance of these races, that a national team are willing to come over to the Tideway and race and sort of put their best foot forward. And I mean, great experience racing people from another country, and brings a different element to it. You don't know what's going to happen.
No, totally. And the Dutch love coming to the boat race fixtures. In years gone by, we've had the Dutch under-23s, we've had Neurals. You know, you went up against Neurals in your own set of fixtures, Grace. So again, it must be really exciting to race a bit of an unknown quantity that's not sort of known here on the UK circuit.
Yeah, we were very lucky to race Neurals last year, and it is that thing. It's unknown. You don't know what stage everyone is at of their training, and Cambridge is obviously building towards the boat race, and now we're sort of in the last few months build up, so the standard's going to be progressing, so it's exciting.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, whereabouts are we on that boat race journey, that cycle? Are there still kind of big changes maybe to come for these crews in the next few weeks?
I think you can make a lot of progress in that last month or so. It kind of feels like the season's quite long, and you're sort of, they're probably still in the heavy training phase, so it can sometimes feel slightly unrewarding this bit, and that last little month you really click, and they're still going to be slightly on edge about whether they're getting selected or not. So it's not the most comfortable time of the season, but it's equally very exciting. But yeah, still I'm sure plenty of gains to be made, and I know from my experience last year, these fixtures are so important for that. Like, they teach you the pressure, the steering, the navigation. So it's going to, I feel like they'll learn a lot more from today, and Oxford will be sitting there watching with interest, and vice versa, and the other days.
And there's that added sort of pressure, I guess, in that this is the first time that we're live streaming the fixtures for this season. So they've got the cameras on them as well, a little bit more prep with what it might be feeling like on boat race day. But as we've already mentioned, this isn't the first fixture, it's just the first live stream one. We talked about Oxford Brookes going up against the Cambridge women. We've also had the Cambridge men hosting a fixture, a sort of, training fixture at home against Durham University. So they're coming into this with a little bit of experience. I guess racing someone on your home stretch, the Cambridge men, is going to be very different to racing on the Tideway.
Yeah, the Cambridge setup is very different than the Tideway, so I think it doesn't give you the pressure of the current, the flow, the starting. It's a narrow canal, so you pretty much stick to your side, stick to your lane. So I think that's really good because it's intense racing. It's literally just who's faster. Whereas this, you've got a lot more strategy, a lot more can go right or wrong. So I think this is a little bit more exciting and more indicative of what the boat race will actually be like.
No, and you even mentioned, right, that's what made the big difference in the first fixture for the Cambridge women against Oxford Brookes. That was a really big disparity. Oxford Brookes really got the sort of steering and the course navigation bit right, which will have given Cambridge a lot of lessons to learn for this live streamed fixture.
Yeah, and I think the fixtures are so important for the coxswains as well, potentially most important for them, because a lot comes down to them and their ability to react under pressure, respond real life time. You don't have time to sit there and mull it over. You've got to make decisions on the fly. So I think last time maybe they wouldn't have been that happy with how they steered, and you've got to push the boundaries but try and not push them too fast. It's finding that balance.
We'll look forward to watching all of that unfold. So Grace and I will be taking you through all of the racing today as we catch it, as we see it live. The first of those races, as we've already said, 12 o'clock, the Cambridge University Boat Club women going up against UL. Hello and welcome, and just 15 minutes to go until we just heard there the first race of today that will be live streaming, Cambridge women going up against the University of London. My name's Camilla Hadland-Horrocks. I'm here with Grace Prendergast, and we've got quite an action-packed day, as you can see, Grace, coming up ahead of us. Yeah, I think there was some very exciting racing going on today. As with any fixtures, you don't know what's going to happen, which sort of adds to the excitement. And I think there'll be some good close racing. We've got the Dutch national team here, which is very exciting to have them on the Thames, and then the Cambridge women going up against the University of London. Yeah, so 4 fixtures being live streamed today. We've also got the lightweights in and amongst this, but we won't be capturing that on video. So there are your 4 fixtures starting off at 12 o'clock. That will be the A crew from Cambridge women going up against the top University of London crew. It's then the B boat from Cambridge women going up against the ULB boat, and then we go back in reverse. So the B boat, or the what could be the reserves, going up against the University of London, and the Cambridge men facing the Dutch national team just after 1 o'clock. And you can see how busy it is here on the embankment here in Putney. Lots of busyness up and along the towpath, and they've got plenty of action to cast an eye over. Yeah, it's a good shot of how chaotic the embankment is on a Saturday or Sunday with all the weekend rowing here, and I think there'll be some good shows for everyone to watch out on the river today. So this couldn't happen without our sponsors. First and foremost, Gemini, our principal partner of the boat race. We've also partnered with Graduate Hotels, T. Rowe Price, Chapel Down, Hydro, Rival Kit, the RNLI, and we'll be broadcasting the boat race day with the BBC on the 26th of March, so get that in your calendars. That is coming up. But yeah, big thank you to all of our partners that can make this happen.
Strap on in, take a seat. You feel the river, you feel the beat. Let's grow together, we roll together. Better you, better me. Up and down.
Where are you feeling it? My butt? My glutes?
It's live, it's real, it's human. A beautiful move.
Get ready for that shift.
Wherever you been, the journey begins. So roll.
Come on, you got it.
What A glorious shot there of the Thames from our drone that will be following the racing today. We'll get some great pictures from that, I'm sure. Just a gentle breeze pushing onto the ripples of the water for these crews to deal with in this first set of matchups here between the Cambridge women and University of London, the two A crews here on your screen. And we can see head-to-head James Trotman for Cambridge, coxing and steering that crew down the course, going up against Darcy Beckett, who will be very familiar with these waters. The UL Boathouse, of course, just past the finish of the traditional boat race course.
Yeah, it's a good advantage to be able to train on this river all the time. So I'm sure Darcy has a good perception of where he wants to put his crew and the best water, best places to be.
So we can just cast an eye over the Cambridge women there. Quiver Dempsey in the stroke seat, the only returning blue to this crew. Backed up, though, by an experienced hand along the boat race course, Gemma King, who I know has raced in the lightweight boat race and also in Blondie as well. Grace, is that correct? Or is it just the lightweight boat race?
Definitely the lightweight boat race. I'm not sure if she's been in the Blondie, maybe. And then you've got Isabel Bastion, Freya Cato, Jenna Armstrong, who was in Blondie last year, Karina Graf, Rosa Millard, and Alex Riddle-Webster.
Yeah, so a couple of returners there, but only Quiver Dempsey, who knows what it feels like to race in the blue boats. And then for the University of London, Darcy Beckett, who we've already mentioned in the cox's seat, Jessie Martin, Phoebe Snowden, Emily Lindberg, Georgie Robinson Ranger, Iona Dixon, Esme Jones, Trudy Marks, and Selena Jones. So umpire Matt Smith, we had Matt Smith umpiring the Trial 8s that took place. If you joined us back in December, Grace and I took you through the Cambridge Trial 8s. It was Matt Smith who was directing from the umpire's launch, and he had a lot of action, didn't he, to look forward to. We had a restart. There was so much going on in those Cambridge Trial 8s.
He did. He really had his work cut out for him in that race, so I think he'll be anticipating another busy race with these ones. The way the fixtures work is they're not doing a full course race. They'll be splitting it into two and doing 2 half courses. So they're shorter races, but I imagine just as action-packed.
Yeah, and lots of lessons learned. We talk about the crews learning lessons, but Matt Smith will be gearing up to umpire the main race on the 26th of March, and there's plenty of learnings to take on what to do in certain situations. We've got an experienced crew from UL who will know these waters, so hopefully we'll be a little bit more, I guess, competent at understanding the lines, but very different racing side by side with another crew. That's something that the University of London won't do particularly often.
No, and so this will be a great experience and put both crews under a bit of pressure, and I think both crews might have different strengths and talents and advantages, so it'll be interesting to see who on the day can rise to the occasion and come out on top. And then also it's an interesting situation because you've got 2 opportunities. You've got a restart and you've got a second race, so you can, even if you can adapt to what happens in the first one and learn from that, then you're going to be advantaged for the second. So yeah, you can't sort of win one and then not improve. And you see them sort of lining up and heading towards the bridges and heading towards the start.
Yeah, and a very sort of together push off there from the University of London. They look like they mean business here, and this will be a really huge opportunity for them, right? One of the big university programs here in the UK to be put on the stage with the boat race crews to see how they match up. And obviously Cambridge will go on to race more and more fixtures throughout the season, but this will be a one-off opportunity for UL this year. Good prep for their women's head and some of the later races in the season, but this is really a once-in-a-season opportunity.
Yeah, and I think from my experiences of racing the fixtures last year, it's the Cambridge Oxford Boat Race is such a well-known race that all the crews that come up against either the Cambridge crews or the Oxford crews in the fixtures really want to take it to them to prove that actually we're actually just as fast out there in different clubs and different universities. So I feel like everyone is out to win. And there's there's the weighing up for the Cambridge crew. They are training to try and do the whole course race. So how they approach this, whether it's a shorter race, so do they go for slightly more intensity than they would in a longer race, or do they try and stick to their race plan and treat it like a full race to rehearse for the boat race? So it'll be interesting to see their tactics and see how much everyone blasts out of the start, considering you're only doing half the course.
And like you say, this was you this time last year, Grace. What is the direction, from the coaching team? Is it to treat it like it is the race, and racing it to that middle point is how you would be racing then, or shorten it and go out a little bit faster?
I think you go to win. And the course distance. So I think you do want to be on your general base rhythm, but equally you're not going to sit there and let someone walk away with you and stay on that rhythm just because you're practicing that. So I think competition comes out, and I think you're naturally going to be slightly higher intensity for this, and they look like they're getting pretty close to a start. And
there goes the flag.
There it goes.
Matt Smith, the umpire, has just put down that red flag, which means the start of this piece to halfway. So 2 pieces, the first one to halfway and then halfway to the finish. And gosh, it looks a lot bumpier than it does, looking from the bank on this camera. Looks like a little bit of chop there, Grace, for them to handle.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting angle because it can look a bit deceptive, but that does look like they're going to have some tricky conditions to sort of manage, especially in the start when it's all sort of a little bit chaotic anyway, and you've got to come onto your rhythm, manage the conditions. But it looks like both crews have had a pretty good start, and as we said, the nature of a slightly shorter race, it's probably even more important not to get behind out of the start because you've got less time to make up for any sort of ground lost right at the start.
This is going to be a huge test here for the Cambridge University Boat Club women. They've just got about a canvas up now as they come past us here at London Rowing Club, where Grace and I are based. So a small advantage here in these early strokes. But the University of London, they're going to be one of the toughest bits of competition here. Cambridge unfortunately lost to Brooks a couple of weeks ago in that fixture. University of London made it to the semi-finals of the Island Challenge Cup at Henley Royal Regattas last year. A lot of this crew were part of that team, so they're really a strong outfit.
They are. They'll be a really good stepping stone, I think, for the Cambridge crew. And initially, it looks like I think Cambridge may have had a little bit of a wake up from the last fixture, and they've come out very strong. And I don't know if it would be to say unexpected, but they've got a good lead off the start. So I think they'll be happy with the shift that they've already made from the last fixture. But yeah, as you say, the UL crew is experienced and they do have good talent in there, so I wouldn't rule them out just yet. But yeah, very clean start for both crews, but yeah, Cambridge has slightly taken the lead.
Yeah, and a good stride out there for Cambridge. And this is the point where we're coming up towards Barn Elms Boat Club on the left. That's the building you can see just to the left of your picture. Grace, at this point in the race, we're not even a kilometre in. Where are you thinking about settling onto rhythm?
It's normally around here. I think you're normally around the 90-second mark is where you start to push out and get onto your rhythm, and then that's not a quick thing to do. You might start at the 90-second, but that might take you a minute to slowly step down. You don't want to do it in one aggressive move, but it looks like Cambridge has done that very well, and also know that the first corner is their advantage. So I think they'll be really wanting to make the most of it before they get into the corner where UL can sort of take the inside and have a slight more advantage. But it looks like Cambridge has done the push on, settled onto a good rhythm and look confident with their stroke and their race pace.
We can see there the University of London, who are now having to play catch-up, but as you've rightly pointed out, Grace, their favourable bend, just starting to come into play in a moment's time. We're looking at the stroke of the University of London, Jessie Martin, an experienced oarswoman from, she represented Great Britain at the Europeans last season. And they're looking at her opposite number, Quiver Dempsey. We've already said the only returner to this crew. And Quiver wasn't in the stroke seat at any point in last season. So what sort of change do you think that will make to this crew?
I think she brings a good experience to the crew, and having done the boat race once out at Ely, once on the Tideway, she'll be able to lead from the front, and I think the communication between a stroke and coxswain is incredibly important. So I think having someone with her experience in there is going to be vital, which is probably why she's made the move up there. It's always a toss-up though, because I think sometimes when you're a bit further back in the boat, you can also have a good old influence on the crew as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the influence that she's having is making an impact. Clearly they're now a length up on the University of London. They've just about broken that clear water, which I think, again, given that it's going to be UL's bend in a moment's time, how important is it to get that distance?
It's important, because once you get that clear water, you can start to sort of come across from this angle. It looks like they are starting to kind of cut into UL's water, which they're definitely still moving away, but you want to make sure you are steadily moving away, because you don't want to get caught in the danger of cutting across and then another crew being able to come at you, and you could be in serious issues then. That's a probably slightly clearer view, but you'll be able to tell that UL will be getting those dirty puddles down from the Cambridge crew, which is not easy water to roll in, and I think you can kind of see a few little splashes there of them kind of battling those puddles.
And I think perhaps UL have just about touched overlap again. I'm sure Darcy Burkett in the cox's seat will be keeping her crew informed of that contact. And yeah, you can see it there from the drone shot, just holding round the bend, which is exactly where Cambridge will want to be. They won't want UL to gain on their bend, but that hold is really important. And both crews, University of London at 34, Cambridge at 33, looking fairly settled and relaxed. No one really chasing it at the moment.
No, and for being slightly shorter races, I might have expected them to be up slightly higher, but then equally the stage of training they'll be at, they wouldn't have really got into that real race pace top end speed. So I think they'll still be able to find a few more pits in this last month or two before the boat race, but at the moment it's looking pretty controlled and well within their own means. But yeah, they seem to steadily almost be moving away on the outside, which is impressive, and it gives the crew a lot of confidence when you can do that, and you're at a slight disadvantage having to go around the longer way of the corner, clearly. But yeah, they'll be sort of getting momentum from that, and then when they can get onto the straight, they're like, okay, now is our time to really, really go.
We're looking at the faces of the middle four there from the University of London: Emily Lindbergh, Georgie Robinson, Raina Iona Dixon, the three in the middle. And as we zoom out now to the Umpire's launch, it's still holding for UL. I think there's just like centimetres in it that Cambridge are just bumping out, but UL and Cambridge are now taking very different lines around this corner.
They are. It seems like a very interesting line, and I can't tell, but yeah, it seems like Cambridge has sort of drifted out maybe slightly too far. But yeah, there was a point where they were definitely on different tracks, and I think Cambridge, if they were smart here or maybe a little bit earlier, should have really put the foot down, and that's where they can be kind of decisive, because as soon as you let a crew have another sniff, it can kind of give them a little bit more excitement. But once again, this is a learning thing, so they might look back on that and be like, there was actually a moment maybe about a minute ago where we could have almost shut this race down, and it seems like they're kind of letting them get in back with a sniff.
Yeah, it was a very decisive move, wasn't it, there from James Trotman to move out a little bit further into Hammersmith Bridge. You can see the impact that has had. Overlap still again now for UL. They'll have been very grateful for that opportunity to start grouping back, and it'll give them that little bit more confidence, Grace.
Yeah, and then the crew starts to sense that, and I think the coxswain will get excited. The energy boosts, and the rhythm still looks good, but you can definitely see a few pain faces. This is when they're very far apart for racing on the Tideway. Normally you see the crews a lot closer together.
Yeah, and again, I know that, the University of London row on this stretch, they train on this stretch, they certainly will know what the stream is doing, and the impact that has on the racing water, and they look very sharp, and they're utilising the water really well. They seem to be catching on really well at the front end. So yeah, I think they've got it within them to start moving back here. Cambridge I can't tell whether it's Cambridge are a bit too far out or UL are a bit too far into the bank, but certainly they do seem very far apart.
Yeah, I think, and they might be coming up to another boat here, so this is going to add a little bit of wash and wake for them to deal with, which will be, you can gain or lose quite a few seats when you get hit with wash, and I'm sure they're fine, but they do look like they're coming along close.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with the fixtures. Very different to boat race day. The river does not get closed to traffic, so they have to battle with whatever elements are out there, but navigated extremely well there by the University of London. We're back onto Cambridge here, and it's James Trotman just taking a glance across to the left, looking very calm. We often see coxes in kind of racing positions, screaming at their crews, but very composed there from Trotman.
Yeah, he does look very calm, and I think these are such good learning opportunities for the coxswains, and I'm sure he'll be soaking in every moment and trying to stay focused. But he's got his crew in a good position out in front, and being able to, when the whole crew can see the crew behind them, it sort of relaxes everyone, and you're not having to tell people we're this far behind or this far in front.
So the bow pair there for the University of London, Trudy Marks and Selena Jones. Selena Jones in the bow seat, furthest to your right, women's captain this year of the University of London, and we'll be able to see all of her teammates in front of her putting in a lot of work here to try and pull back the deficit that Cambridge have managed to open up on this tideway stretch. And we are coming into the final kind of few hundred metres here of this piece. They'll be really yearning for that halfway point. If you squint, you can see the Ayot in the distance, which is where we're moving this piece to. And Grace, how is it feeling at this point as someone that's done this piece? Oh, there you go. And finishing, I think, slightly early perhaps, or we just can't see it off camera on the right.
I think it's a hard mindset when you're doing these shorter pieces, because you know where the finish line is. You're always working towards the finish line, so they'll be finished and they'll be exhausted now, but in the back of their mind they'll be like, that is half the boat race. Like, we still have to now probably do a relatively quick turnaround, and they will get their second piece going down. But sometimes the shorter pieces are almost a little bit harder, because you're more aware of where you are. You're not zoning out into a real middle pace rhythm. But yeah, there looks like some tired people out there, but I think they'll be pleased with how that first one went, especially after the fixture last weekend. So I think it's a really good shift around from Cambridge, but now they'll have to regather themselves, know that UL is probably going to come out harder, learn from the last one, and maybe not want to lose as much off the start, and then it's an even playing field again. You get a whole restart.
Yeah, and learnings from both crews. I'm sure it's an opportunity for them to reflect. They're going to spin quickly and move into the second piece. And I think that the second piece is interesting, because you get that opportunity for a bit of a rest. And an opportunity to convene and to chat and talk about what went well, what didn't go so well. And we've seen really big changes in the past between, first piece and second piece with fixtures. I remember last year, big turnarounds, even leaders and winners. That was almost a length and a half there, I would say, that Cambridge won that piece by. There is an opportunity, given how close it was off the start, if UL can hang on, for it to be much more reduced than that.
Yeah, I think so. And these crews go into these races having no clue of what the other crew's tactics are going to be and how fast the other crew's going to be. So after the first piece, they've got more of an idea now. So it's quite a cool challenge to then turn around and be like, hey, how can we actually fix that, turn the result around, and make it a 1-1 draw. So it'll be interesting to see UL's tactics here, whether they want to just cling on that little bit more. But it was very, very like the start. There were no decisive moves. Cambridge just slowly edged out. So it wouldn't take a lot, I think, for UL to just sort of try and increase the intensity a little bit more, and then maybe stop the move from the start.
So we're going to paddle backwards a little bit just so that we can hit that halfway mark and get the full sort of extent of the piece. Do you think they'll take this one as a rolling start, Grace, because it's kind of reflective of that halfway point, or do you think they might start it again as if it were the start of the race?
I think they'll start it again like it's the start of the race. That's what we did last year, but often it also depends on what the coaches and the crews want to do. If there's something that maybe one of the crews want to practice a little bit more, I think they're always very, very willing to cater to the learning opportunities. That's the point of these fixtures, is to try things out. So I guess if both crews agree, but I often found in the past the second one was a little bit harder to line up evenly. So I think the second one, everyone gets a little bit antsy that you're going to get left behind. So there's a lot of tapping up, and you've got to be onto it.
So we've got the first glimpses of the next race to start off. This is the Cambridge Women B boat going up against the UL second crew. And again, fairly evenly matched, but I think the acceleration here of the Cambridge B boat closest to us, just looking that little bit smoother, that acceleration. They look like they're picking the boat about the water, and they've almost got a third of a length now past London Rowing Club.
Yeah, the Cambridge crew is looking very long in their strokes, and it looks like they're putting their blades in when they get out to full length. Like, they don't look like they're wasting much. So they seem to be rowing like a really good rhythm and making the most of every stroke, which in a long distance race is important. You don't want to be wasting any energy. But yeah, very clean start.
More distance there for the B crew from CUBC, the women's crew, and a lot of these athletes, you know, they're a big training group, right? They'll be training with the A crew, who we've just seen going up against UL. They'll be looking to prove themselves in this B fixture, because there is still so much opportunity for fluidity between the boats, Grace.
There is, like, no crews would have been set in stone, so I think the athletes in these crews are going to be wanting to go out there and put a really, really strong performance out to say, hey, look, I still want to be in the A crew. We've still got time, and the way we raced is good enough to be. And it looks like we're going to be coming together at a very strong angle here. Someone's going to have to make a very sharp turn, but okay, we might be in the clear. But there was a very aggressive turn from the Cambridge coxswain to swing on in there. And it's just as important for the coxswains to put their hands up in these races as well and show that they can navigate the river well, respond to the pressure, so they will also want to put their best foot forward to be in that final selection for the Blue Boats come March the 26th.
And it seems to be pulling a little bit closer together. It was a really quick, jumpy start for Cambridge, but UL still hanging on in there, certainly not letting them get away. And with this steering, you know, the steering accounts for so much of your speed, and especially on a river like this. Adjustments in steering are a big, big part of how much distance you can gain on another crew. And given how much adjustment we've had, I think Cambridge should be further up than this, probably.
I agree. I think not only is the turning the rudder going to slow you down and give you more drag in the water, but as a rower, it's actually quite detrimental. And at the moment, they'll all be on edge, that they're about to clash blades and the rhythm will be changing. I'm surprised there hasn't been a good old clash yet.
Yeah, still overlap between these two crews. This is the B crew from the Cambridge University Boat Club women going up against the B crew from UL, and they've come apart once again. And as you say, I think they've gotten off pretty well there, considering how close those blades came together. All good practice. And again, it just seems to me like UL are pulling round a lot. You know, it's whether they're trying to kind of cut in to push Cambridge further into the bank. I don't know what tactically this is trying to do, just to put a bit of pressure on them, but it certainly seems to be the University of London that is moving towards their bow side. No, hang on. Have I got that correct?
Stroke
side. No, well done. Good correction, Grace. Than it is Cambridge, because Cambridge seem to be holding a line fairly well.
Yeah, and then that makes it difficult for the Cambridge coxswain to decide they've got to respond and be like, am I best to move to put my crew out of danger because I don't want them to clash, but they've got to respond to the steering that UL is doing, and that's, once again, it's about thinking clearly when all the pressure's on. That's why these fixtures are so important. But yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell with the angles, but it does look like UL is really trying to, I guess, not lose too much on the outside of the corner, but it's a real toss-up because you also want to give your crew enough space and calmness to row their best race. And when you are on edge that you're going to be clashing, it's really hard to not tense up. And then you're wasting energy and everything becomes harder, and then the rhythm becomes a little bit more panicky rather than a real strong rhythm. But it looked like Cambridge has sort of dealt with all the little steering turns well and starting to take more of a lead on this inside.
Yeah, these crews much closer together, both vying for the same water, which we didn't see in the previous race between the A crews. Interesting, different stations this time around for Cambridge and UL. How much impact does that make, Grace?
I think the stations, everyone has their preferred station, and I think the station that Cambridge is on is the one that most people would probably want to pick if they won the coin toss. You have a slight disadvantage off the very initial start, but then this bend, if you can hang on and not let the other crew get too far in front that they can cut you off, you have this advantage coming round. And I think technically over the whole boat race course it evens out, but when you're only doing half the course, you want this big bend because you're not doing the next section in this race.
I think UL were just holding on as long as they can, because it seems like this B crew from Cambridge University has just stepped on hugely in the last 25 strokes or so. They've really drawn out that distance, and so I think UL possibly now just pushing backwards ever so slightly. But we're about to kick off with the A crew fixtures. Once again, this is piece 2 here between UL and Cambridge. And we'll be getting underway in just a moment. Like you say, lots of adjusting here when you're in the middle of this river, and a little bit more kind of agitated crew members trying to get one up.
And I think you've done a piece. The lactate's high. It's not been long enough to fully recover, so I think the stress is high, and you don't want to start behind off the start. So I feel like crew, as a rower, you looking over, you're hoping your coxswain is pushing the boundaries but not pushing them too far. But then you can get into the habit of, you're like, well, we're both just touching up, and they're underway. So they have done it from a standing start again.
Yeah, so a really quick start there from the University of London on the right-hand side of your screen, trying, I think, to get the advantage. Like we say, it was very even before, and so I think if they're trying to jump and be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more powerful off the start, it'll give them a bit of a buffer for that middle bit of rhythm that Cambridge seem to have the upper hand on.
Yeah, and they've, from memory, switched over stations.
Yes,
and
correct.
so I think that'll give Cambridge a good experience of, they get this initial inside bend, but they're going to have to work really hard in the second half of this race, because they're going to come into the bend where it favours UL, and it's hard to tell, but it looks like UL's done pretty well at the start, but I think Cambridge is still managing to creep away, which is impressive, because it's that second time you've given the other crew I guess an opportunity to learn and reset, but they've had another good start, and they're really making the most of their inside.
Yeah, I think Cambridge actually have gained more in the first few 100 metres than they did in the first piece. As I say, UL really jumped, but have kind of not settled as well into those starting strokes as Cambridge have done, and it's almost a length, about 3/4 of a length now to Cambridge already, and we're barely 2 minutes into the piece.
Yeah, it's a good start, and maybe they've just been able to cope with the lactate burn a little bit more than the other crew, and I mean, it looks pretty lumpy and bumpy out there, so maybe also just managing the conditions a bit better, and it doesn't really seem to be affecting them much at all. Like, they're making it look flat and easy, but you can see when you look along the side of the boat how there is quite a bit of movement on the river, and I think they're doing well to make it look this easy.
Yeah, a really big advantage already for Cambridge, and UL have got a really tough job ahead of them, a huge mountain to climb, being on the outside of this bend, the second part of the Big Surrey Bend, and you can see hard work and grimacing faces on the face of Esme Jones in the three-seater returner to the University of London for this season. And as moving forward through the boat, a really cool, calm pace being set here by Jessie Martin, and I think a slightly higher rating than we saw in the previous piece, Grace.
Yeah, it looks like they've sort of come in with slightly more intensity, and I guess that's what these are about, trying something new. Maybe they were like, we've got to step up and see what we can do, so let's try and change something. It might pay off, it might not. But the Cambridge crew is looking relatively calm. It looks like Quiver's setting a good rhythm and leading well, and it looks relaxed. It looks like they've got time. They aren't rushing. They get a good lock onto the water and sort of move the boat. Each stroke is being used, and you're getting the most out of each stroke, which is important when you're onto your second of the pieces in the fixtures.
And this is where the University of London might be able to see a glimmer of hope as the bend runs out for Cambridge and starts to move in the favour of the women in purple. And this bend, you can see, I think, the bow ball edging back for the University of London. They've got over a length to try and pull back, and I would say, less than 10 minutes to do that.
Yeah, it's a big gap to make up, but they do look like they aren't letting Cambridge run away with it, and this is probably a very important part of the race where they'll know that they don't want to give away clear water, because then Cambridge can start coming across and then you lose all your advantage. And Cambridge will be thinking the opposite. They'll be wanting to get out in front enough that they can start coming across, and doing pretty well. I think they seem to still be edging, considering they are on the outside as well. And thinking back to the trial eights, we saw a lot of tight racing. So I think that they can cope with the pressure. They can cope with the side by side down to the line, and I think would have learnt a lot from those close races and be like, let's try and make it not that close again, because it's a little bit close for comfort. So they seem to be wanting to shut it down a little bit earlier.
And again, I've been so impressed by James Trotman in the coxswain seat for Cambridge, who has just looked so calm, very poised. As I said, no big movement, no huge kind of, sways of the body, just very quick, very calm turns. And, the ex-St Paul's schoolboy will be used to, again, the St Paul's Boathouse on this course, will know the river, will know what he wants the crew to do. And again, hugely experienced, a silver medalist from the Junior World Championships, and again, great opportunity for him to showcase what he knows about this very changeable stretch of river.
Yeah, I think growing up coxing on this river is a huge advantage. From my experience, I did one season rowing on this river, and even still by the end of the season, I was learning something every session we went out in. It's so changeable. There is so much to it, and then you change the conditions, and that changes it again, and every part is different. So his experience will be so valuable, and he seems to be doing well. Like, I think he's cutting it fine enough, but then also giving his crew space to relax and not feel on edge. So he's doing well, and this is where he really wants to start coming in to make sure that's when UL can't start to sneak back in on their inside.
Yeah, and some beautiful water up here. I think it's calmed right down with the wind direction, not impacting this stretch as much. Lovely calm conditions, and it's exactly what you will want as your body is starting to feel so tired and you have to think a lot more about the technical aspects of getting your blade in the water. To not have choppy waters, one less thing to think about.
Yeah, it's a real tosser. It's interesting though, because sometimes when I look at flat water, all I see is pain. I'm like, there's nothing else to focus on, as you say, which is great when you get tired and you don't have to worry about your blade clipping a rogue wave or anything. But then equally, there's nothing to slow you down, and it's just how hard you can go. As there's no limiting factor. So yeah, it's you always want nice water, but I think it definitely brings out the most painful races as well.
Yeah, and lots of pain faces now. This is the point that they'll be starting to wind up. They'll be able to see the railway bridge in their vision, and I think that is the last big landmark that these crews row under before they reach the final post. So it's really crunch time now, and despite being so far up, I expect Cambridge will still be practicing how they'll want to finish their race.
Yeah, it's very hard to practice a wind when you don't have another crew pushing you. So they'll be wanting to use these fixtures to really practice that, because yes, you can do it in training, but it's just not the same when you've got the pressure and they've got a crew sitting there. They've got a decent lead, but it can still change. You can't rule them out yet. So it'll be a good opportunity to start practicing how you're going to step up, because once a crew's tired, you need a very clear plan about how you're going to increase the rate, increase the pressure and all of that. And you learn so much from each one. So this will be when they're starting to go through that sequence, and they would have talked about that. They would have a general plan, and you can see them, I think, slowly starting to increase their rate, and it's all about taking speed with it.
Yeah, UL trying to rise to match that increased rating from Cambridge. This is the point where they'll be motivated to just push everything at it to close that distance, because it is, it will be recorded, that distance, and it will be reviewed, and clubs up and down the country will be assessing how much did Cambridge beat UL by, and they'll want to close that as much as possible.
Yeah, I think Cambridge will be really happy with this performance. It looks like UL's really winding to the line as well, but they seem to be, maybe Cambridge seems to be on a slightly lower beat, but maybe doing it more efficiently. It's finding that balance of really building to the line, but taking your speed with you. But a good performance from Cambridge, because it's a very strong UL crew. So to come away with 2 wins against a very strong crew, I think they'll be really, really happy with that step up, and you gain so much confidence from these fixtures, not only learning things, but any win you can take is a good thing, and it sort of makes you more excited for the next block of training. You go back with a little bit more motivation, so I think it'll sort of boost the crew for the next training block.
Definitely, and this University of London crew littered with under 23 talent, with multiple kind of Henley Women's winners. They're a really seasoned crew, and even as individuals, but a lot of them have rowed in previous seasons together. The likes of Emily Lindberg and Georgie Robinson Ranger and Phoebe Snowden, all part of that UL crew that have moved through. So they know each other as a unit. So, like you say, impressive for this Cambridge crew to come together, newly formed, and to take on someone like that.
Yeah, and it bodes well for both. It was an impressive performance from UL as well, and you can go back and watch the replay of the first race, where I think it stayed closer for longer. I think they really, both crews wanted to get one under their belt, and UL managed to, I think, cling on for a little bit longer than they did in the second piece. But you can see it's nice clean starts, and these are great opportunities for the crews to practice the start, because that's often one of the trickiest things to get right on the tideway with the water. It's tough.
No, absolutely. And even, we saw a couple of years ago in the Oxford women's crew on race day, there was a blade lost off the start. So it can happen on the day. And so, yeah, like you say, the more opportunities to kind of drill in those strokes, how it feels under pressure up against a crew that's a bit of an unknown. I think, again, just those little bits of confidence that that they'll draw upon when there's a lot of eyes watching them on the 26th of March.
Yeah, and you want to get these things right before that day, because it's a lot of training for something small like a crab in the start to go wrong. So these opportunities are so valuable for that. And this image here shows the distance in the second race, and it definitely started to extend a bit more. And Cambridge, I think, had the stamina and the fitness to back it up, which is surely credit to all the training they've been doing, and maybe a sign of the stage of their season they're in. They're coming into the serious sort of the business end of this season, and they've been away for a training camp after Christmas, New Year's, where I think a lot of things really click for the team. It's the chance to only focus on rowing. You're not trying to navigate it around your studies, so I think they would have come away stronger from that, and they're starting to, I think, put out some really good performances.
Yeah, we'll look. That's the Cambridge women's A boat now kind of concluded for the day, but don't go anywhere just yet, because we've got plenty more. We saw the first piece take place between Cambridge B, which is on your screens referred to as Blondie in inverted commas, and the reason we've got those inverted commas is because officially these boats have not been selected. As we've said, there's still a long way to go yet. So the Cambridge B boat, which on the day will be called Blondie, and we saw their first piece take place. They'll be doing a second piece in just a moment's time. We'll see if we can catch anything from that, but very shortly, in about 10 minutes time, we'll have the second boat, Goldie in inverted commas, Cambridge B, from the men's side, going up against the top University of London boat. So that will be really intriguing to see a top university crew, the A crew, going against Cambridge's second crew. So we might see a bit of a different result there.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, and I think they are the kind of challenges you want. I think this will be really good for Goldie to go up. The potential Goldie to go up against the top crew from University of London. It's the pressure will be on. They've put out their 8 best men, so it'll be an interesting race, and I think they'll be wanting to rise to the challenge, because as we spoke about before, this is their opportunity to put their hand up and say, hey, look, I still want to be on the blue boat come boat race day. So I think putting yourself under more pressure like this does give you the opportunity to show how good you can be.
Yeah, and we won't see the Cambridge B crew lineups. We'll see the A crew lineups, but again, intriguing to see a couple of experienced names, Rafe Bourica and Cam Spears in that B crew, names that you'd expect to be right on the verge of making that A crew, especially with not much returning talent for Cambridge. It seems like there's a lot up for grabs there on the men's side.
It really does, and you've got Ollie the coxswain as well. He's the men's president this year, so I think from looking at these crew names, it looks like there still is room for shuffling. It looks like there's some pretty talented people in this second crew, so they'll be wanting to really put out a good performance, and it probably bodes well for the depth that the Cambridge men have this year based on who's in this boat. But I'm pretty excited to see how they go and how they're formed as a crew, and see what they sort of put out there.
Yeah, it's coming up in a few moments' time, but in the meanwhile, a big thank you to all of our sponsors for making this happen. We could not do this without them, especially Gemini, our principal partner for the boat race, but also Graduate Hotels, T. Rowe Price, Chapel Down, Hydro, Rival Kit in the RNLI.
This is not your typical rower. Quiet and sleek. Immersive 22-inch display. 2,000 plus live and on-demand workouts taught by world-class athletes. Bring the outside in and explore London to Scotland or Miami. Try today with a 30-day risk-free trial. Shop now at hydro.co.uk.
So the site there of Fulham Football Club on the side of the river. that new part of the stadium, now just peering over what will be the championship course in late March. They'll get a great view from there, won't they?
They will, and I always used to remember when there would be a game on and you'd be training here and the cheers you can hear. You forget how close you are to it, but yeah, it's a very loud stadium, but it would be a very, very good viewing point for the boat race.
And the next race we've got on the course shortly approaching, umpired by Clare, Harvey. This will be the B crew from Cambridge going up against the University of London. We're now on to the men's squads. So yeah, really, as you said, a sort of experienced lineup here for Cambridge, Grace.
Yeah, and most of these guys would have competed in the trial eights as well, and they also did a at-home fixture, as we talked about before, back out at Ely a few weeks ago, I think. So this will be their first fixture on the Thames, getting more of that boat race feel and that the challenges that come along with the Thames, which are exciting but challenging nonetheless.
Yeah, very different to Ely, I'm sure. So
a little bit more exciting than Ely, to be fair.
Well, Ollie Boyne certainly in the coxswain seat, a lot more to do. Sean Hayes, Luke Beaver, Cameron Spears, Rafe Burrick, Dan Toy, Thomas Marsh, Orlando Morley and George Hawkswell from the Cambridge squad. And they'll be going head-to-head with Costanza Giovini, Josh Burke, Tom Cross, George Lachlan, Henry Miles, Tristan Visa, Joe Middleton, Joe Trevor and Hugo Oglina. So we'll be joining those crews very shortly near Putney Bridge, which is our race start for these pieces and the race start for the boat race. And a glorious day we've got. It really is gorgeous. We'll be very grateful if these conditions are replicated on race day.
I know, it's hard to think back to the trial eights, and we were sitting here watching when it was just finished all the snow. So it's definitely a nicer spectating conditions and racing conditions this time. But yeah, fingers crossed for nice weather like this for the boat race for not only the rowers but the people on the sideline spectating as well. It makes for a nicer day.
It's great to have so many spectators here as well for the fixtures. I know it always draws a lot of interest. I think people they like to see the measure of everyone likes to have their prediction of who they think's performing well. So I'm sure we'll have had some people here on the bank for yesterday's men's fixture of Oxford versus Molesey, and then they'll be trying to draw comparisons with what they see today and this afternoon and these next couple of races we've got coming up.
Yeah, it really builds the suspense, because I think the boat race is such an interesting race in the fact that you do not see Cambridge and Oxford come up against each other until the actual day, but you see them come up against the same crews. But they're always along different distance races. The crews might be slightly different. So there's a lot of speculation that can come with it, which builds the excitement, and it lets people sit around sort of analysing what might happen on the boat race day. And I mean, you can take what you want from it, and it's always nice to have a little guess and see which crews you might come out on top. And I think this year will be interesting. I think Cambridge and Oxford are looking pretty similar in experience levels across the board, and on the women's side there's not all that many returners, which I think is exciting because it brings a freshness and it brings sort of like an unknown element to it. But yeah, it's I think the anticipation is definitely building as we near.
Yeah, and anticipation building for this next race, due to go off in just 2 minutes' time. We might even, dare I say it, be early, because we've already got both crews lining up just beyond Putney Bridge, looking busy as ever. And just taking a bit of a squint at what we can see, I think on the left there, on the Middlesex side, we've got Cambridge, and on the right, I think we've got the University of London.
Yeah, the umpire will be happy if we're getting away early. And we are away, so they did do a very good job of lining up early.
And I think some adjustment on the steering may be needed here from the University of London on the right-hand side of your picture, because they were going firmly towards the line of boats that line Putney Embankment.
Yeah, both crews definitely look like they want to be sort of hugging that line of boats, and I think that is where the current is best. You want to be as close as you can, and I think Cambridge has done a pretty good job at doing a pretty gradual turn out of that, because you don't want to be sort of shaking your crew when they're pushing out onto rhythm. But they've had a very strong start, and to take what looks like a length in the first 30-40 seconds, you definitely would be happy with that. But it'll be interesting to see what their tactics were, and if that was their tactics, and can they hold that pace, or has it been slightly too much too early? Because that is a very impressive lead to take initially.
A huge lead. The bow ball of the University of London sits on the stroke man for Cambridge. It's the Sean Hayes of Cambridge that will be able to see that bow ball of UL, and we've already mentioned Ollie Boyne in the cock seat, who'll be telling the crew that they've started really well. UL, I don't think losing any more, but certainly it just shows how much impact the start can make, even if your cruising speeds are relatively similar.
Yeah, it's huge, and I mean, to take that much in that short amount of time, I think that gives you a lot of confidence. But equally, on the other hand, if someone can jump out on you and then you can slowly wear them down and push back at them, which looks a little bit what UL is doing. Like they're not losing anymore. That can also be incredibly motivating to be like, well, maybe this crew's gone out too hard and they must be suffering, which it's going to come into their bend, so they do have the opportunity. And it does actually look like they're sort of chipping their bow ball back up the boat a little bit.
Yeah, and they look like they're giving it a lot of time around the finish. It's a very, I guess, specific style of coaching to allow the boat to run and almost pausing around the finish, which up at rate 36, which the University of London are on the right-hand side of the picture, it's giving them a lot of speed on the recovery.
Yeah, I personally quite like that style of rowing. I think it's smart, and some people try and steer away from that in the 8s, but I think in 8, even though it's a big fast boat, you still can have patience and you still can have time, and around the finish that is there's a coach boat quickly whizzing out of the way for the UL crew. It gives you time to let the boat do a little bit of work, and you get a little bit more free speed, whereas if you're just straight off the back straight into the next stroke, it still works, and it's still a very successful way of rowing, but you're having to do a little bit more work along. So I think UL's definitely adopted that technique a little bit, and it seems like they've pushed on to a pretty similar race pace across both crews.
Yeah, and the University of London under a fairly new head coachship, Anthony Smithy, now at the helm for UL, so perhaps a slightly different technical model being instilled into the UL crews, but I think Cambridge have seen the danger, responded, but responded within their means. They're still looking fairly rhythmical.
Yeah, they are, and I think for having such a fast start, it doesn't look like they overshot it too much. They've still managed to push on to a race rhythm that looks maintainable, and maybe they're actually just a really fast starting crew. They have seemed to sort of hold off that initial charge from UL and look like they're onto a rhythm now along the outside, which is impressive, that they are slowly creeping away.
And it is impressive, as we've already mentioned, this is the second crew from Cambridge, but the top crew from the University of London, a couple of Henley Royal Regatta winners in this UL crew in the form of Tom Cross in the 7-seat, Henry Miles in the 5-seat. They won the Prince Albert Challenge Cup last year for University Coxed Fours, a very prestigious university trophy. And gosh, look at that chop. You don't get that sort of those sort of conditions on the Henley Reach, do you? It's a very different kind of race.
Yeah, very different. And it's similar to the women's races we just watched. I feel like this section of the race is where it gets choppy, and now we're starting to get the crews cut in very close. It looks like Cambridge is trying to minimise their outside the corner of as much as possible, and brave move, but it looks like they've sort of been like, oh, slightly too close, I'm going to separate a little bit, which is, I think, is a good call from Ollie.
Well, and like we said, Ollie Boyne fighting for his seat here in the blue boat. The president, you know, you'd expect there's a sort of certain level of expectation, right, that they are in that blue boat come race day. There are occasions that it doesn't happen, but he's really got to prove himself. And look, UL now capitalising on the fact that he's had to pull the boat further back out to the outside of the bend, and UL have jumped on that chance to move back up.
Yeah, I think they saw their opportunity and really are making the most of it, and that sort of shows how much steering can affect a boat. The amount they lost in that move and having to respond to being slightly too close in is huge, and I feel like UL took a half a length very, very quickly and seemed to be sort of chipping away on this inside of the corner, and this is maybe where a slightly more patient start pays off, when you can sit in your race rhythm and be really confident. And they look confident. They look like they were like, okay, you guys go out there, you have your fast start, but we're still going to hang in, and if there's an opportunity, we're going to take it. And they're almost taking a seat every few strokes, which is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, amazing here from the University of London men's first eight, and it's Costanza Giovene in the cox's seat for University of London, who will be telling his crew that I think their bow balls are in front for the first time in this race.
And this is what we spoke about before. If you're behind from the start and can get the momentum, there's nothing better than momentum in rowing. You get such, like, you just, I don't know, you feel so much more energetic, and nothing's changed, but things start going your way and things feel a little bit easier. It looks like Cambridge is starting really here to try and shut that move down, but they've let them come back in a long, long way. It was just over a length that UL's taken, and now they're really caught on the outside, so this is going to be a tough move to stop.
Yeah, and we're fast approaching the end of this piece. Hammersmith Bridge will be a really good indication that only 30-40 strokes to go after the bridge, so UL will have real sort of wind under their sails. They'll know that they've rowed through, and I think they'll be counting down those strokes with pride, just trying to hold off anything that Cambridge can push back at them. But what a fantastic move there from UL. And like we said, that bend, I don't know whether you were ever sort of told roughly what the equivalence is of having the inside bend in lengths is, but it's fairly sizable.
It is very sizable, and I don't know, I probably should know that, to be fair. It's probably should have been my boat race knowledge, but it's sizable. And I think also the mental benefit also of knowing that actually we get to row a little bit less than this crew around here, and especially in this sort of situation where they know this piece is going to finish on this bend. They're not going to have to then go and fight the outside straight away. It's a different ball game when you're just doing two half pieces as opposed to the whole race. So they've done this race well. I think they've had a good strategy, and they've stuck to their race plan, and it's paid off on the second half of this race.
Yeah, and we'll be coming to a close very soon, as we say. This piece will end at the same point that the women's pieces did, and last few very direct, very confident strokes there from UL. I think a great rhythm being set by Josh Burke, very direct and very purposeful, I think, in the drive, and like we say, that little pause around the finish just to allow the boat to catch up with them has really paid off. Yeah,
and I think that slight time around the finish in an 8 also is almost like an anchor point. It gives the crew a place in the stroke where they all meet, they all sit together, they all go, and obviously you do little different things for the rest of the stroke, but it's just one place where you can anchor together and be like, this is where we're going to find each other, and that's going to really set our rhythm, which is definitely paid off for them in this. And I guess if the race was going to continue on and do a full course race, it'd be interesting to see how much this rhythm would pay off in the longer race.
Well, we won't be able to follow this the whole way, and we won't be able to see the second piece of these B boats purely because we don't have the cameras to be able to do that, and we'll have to fly back to the start to be able to see the A crew versus the Dutch. And they're just coming up to the blue doors, as they're referred to. That's around about halfway on the course, just on the right there. You can see that set of sort of shutters, and as they disappear into view, I think that will be a very interesting second piece. You know, I'll love and await to hear the result of the second piece, because that's the first time we've seen a change in lead happen, and I think that's where the interesting discussion with the coaches and with the crew comes off the back of that. You know, why did that happen? Why did we let a lead go? Or for UL, you know, what did we do that allowed us to move forward in that way, and what can we do to do that again? I think there's really interesting discussion points from that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do start the next one, because on the thoughts of UL, are they confident with that sort of race plan, or do they go into the next one and say, hey, look, we should not have let that much go in the start? And then on the flip side, Cambridge, were they like, we went out too hard, we want to peg it back? But then you fall into a trap of being like, well, maybe actually that's it, and you could just end up getting further behind. So yeah, that we'll listen to the results of that one, interestingly.
Well, all calm here again on the Putney embankment. You can see the starting few hundred metres there of each of these pieces we've had today, and we're fast approaching the last set of races for today, which will be the Cambridge men's A crew versus the Dutch national team, and we'll see the crews lining up for that race in just a moment's time. But this next race, it's great that the Dutch do always come in force whenever, you know, the boat race is mentioned. They seem to feature quite a bit, whether it be the under-23s, whether it be the, you know, sort of high potential athletes that are coming up through the ranks, or even, you know, the university clubs, the Neurauses, like you've raced yourself, Grace. And, you know, they're such a great calibre of athletes, and yeah, I just think it's awesome that they get that international exposure through this process.
Yeah, and it seems like the Dutch team is another country that they have a great club system, a great university system, and it seems like they like going to fun regattas as well. I think it's a similar 8 to the one that's racing here, that's also raced at Windermere Cup. So they make the effort to go off and do those races, and that's the fun part of rowing, getting to come and see different rivers, see different courses, race different distances, and it makes it a little bit more exciting than just sticking to your normal 2K racing the entire time. And yeah, it's one of the perks of rowing, is you get to travel to some pretty cool places and see some different sites.
Yeah, and I think that again, I'm sure this will be a very different experience. This will be a new set of Dutch athletes taking on this challenge. Some of them may not have raced on the Tideway before, especially if they've not come across to race things like the head of the river, and they don't get too much opportunity to train or to prepare for what can be thrown. And they've been blessed with a really lovely day, but that might not have been the case.
Yeah, I think if this is the lasting impression of the Thames, they've done pretty well. And I think there's the same for me. The first few times I came, it was such nice weather, and I was like, oh, the Thames is great, like it's beautiful, always nice. And then you get the Thames on a bad day and you're like, wow, this is different. This is actually kind of exciting. Like, it makes some very interesting training sessions, but it can be pretty rough out there. So they've got it on a good day, which is nice. Is giving a lasting good impression of it.
They might be back. Entice them back over to come again. But no, it's great that we've got this. That, you know, the invitation goes out and they take that up to go up against this crew. And this Dutch national team crew, now, you know, let's talk about them for a little bit. Not the top athletes, and over the last few weeks it's been the Dutch selection, it's been the trials for the coming season, and these athletes in this 8 are sort of up and coming.
Yes, and it sounds like they've come off a pretty intense block of trials and training, so they have had a tough lead into this regatta, and these are the ones that are wanting to make the step up into the elite team, and it sounds like soon enough they will know in the next week or so if they get invited to the next trials. So maybe this race will be a nice little just a little bit less pressure, just a nice break from the trial situation. But yeah, so they'll be a talented crew because the Dutch are obviously a very, very strong rowing nation. The ones in the elite team are going to be very good. So if they're anywhere near that standard, it bodes pretty well for this 8, and it'll be exciting to see what they're looking like and what sort of level they have in this 8.
Yeah, and like you say, that it's an intense period, that trialling period. This will be a nice, light-hearted, friendly matchup against Cambridge. But that's all in singles. All of the Dutch trials all take place in singles. So you're going from the smallest boat type and jumping into the biggest boat type, something that you have lots of experience in, Grace. How do you shift that small boat mentality into the big boats?
Yeah, it's very different. And I think I never went the real extremes from the single to the 8. I was always just the pair to the 8, which I was very thankful for. I didn't want to be out there racing the single. But it's different. But I actually do think there's a lot of benefit to it. 8s are very exciting boats, and they're very fast and furious. And sometimes I think the less time you spend in it, you keep the novelty. To make it feel good, it needs a lot of intensity, it needs a lot of excitement. So if you're in it day in, day out, and you start to lose that, it can get a little bit, flat. Whereas I found doing both boats, it kept the 8 really exciting, and you get in it and you want to be there. You're like, this is fast, you've got a coxswain to do the jobs for you, as opposed to a single or a pair. You've got to steer, you've got to call your race plan, you've got to do all that. So it keeps the excitement around the 8, and so I feel like if these guys have been out there trialling in singles, they'll be so pleased to be in here, especially they wouldn't want to be on the Thames in a single racing this, not knowing the river very well. So yeah, I think they'll be excited to be in it, and enjoying the benefits of having 7 other people pushing them down the course as well.
And I'm sure that impact, will really motivate them to give this all they've got. There'll be no expense spared. So great to welcome the Dutch national team: Lucas Keitzer, Daan Vosterveel, Wibo Rustenberg, Olaf Molenaar, Gert-Jan van Deurne, Wietse Morau, Eli Brouwer, Peter van Veen and Sarah Kalf. And they'll be heading up against Cambridge. Let's talk a little bit about Cambridge now. A couple of returners within this mix. One certainly name standing out to me, Ollie Parish, back in the stroke seat, but this time facing his brother in the coxswain seat.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting dynamic. So I imagine they'll obviously know each other very well and have a good level of communication. But yeah, Ollie Parish was obviously in the blue boat last year, so he'll be able to bring that experience from rowing in these races, doing all the fixtures. He'll know how this all works, what you can learn from it, how to approach it. So that'll be very beneficial to the Cambridge crew, and then also backed up by Luca, who has also very, very well experienced, was in the blue boat last year as well. So I think having those two in stern pair sets the boat up really well, and I think that'll be quite a calming effect. And I think they've also done the under 23 men's pair together for GB. So a good solid combination, and I think that brings consistency to a crew when you've got people that know each other. And then even throughout the boat, they've got others that have been well and truly in the Cambridge system for a while, so they know what this racing's like, they know what the boat race is like, and a good level of experience in there. And then obviously Jasper, he was our coxswain last year for the boat race. He switched over to the men's side, but also grew up coxing on the Tideway, so has had experience of boat race, of fixtures, and probably knows this river like the back of his hands.
Yeah, and look, it's again, for going between the women's and the men's crews, we've seen it done before. Matthew Holland obviously very famously did that, one with both crews on the Cambridge side. Do you think that's something that Jasper has in mind as a goal, to see this all the way through?
I think so. I think if you are in the position, obviously only the coxswains can switch between the men's and women's team. It would be quite a cool thing to witness and see, I guess, the similarities of both rowing in a men's eight and rowing in a women's eight. I know back home for me in New Zealand, our coxswain at the Tokyo Olympics, Caleb Shepherd, had come from the men's team, and I think him being in the men's team for a while and then coming to the women's team brings a lot of different knowledge. You learn a lot of different things from each crew, and you can, I don't know, I guess combine them to become a very well-rounded and bring the strengths of one crew to the other. So I'm sure, I hope Jasper brings what he learnt last year in our crew. Hopefully we taught him something.
Yes, well, all he knows, all he knows, Grace. I'm sure you've taught Jasper Parish, and well, look, we've been talking about singles. We've got a few singles out here on the water. They're going to have to get out of the way sharpish if they don't want to be motored down by some very fast-moving men's eights in just a moment's time. We're due to kick off at 1:10, so 6 minutes time, and I believe we're doing the same structure, so two pieces, one to halfway and then halfway to the finish, and we'll be following both of these races the whole way, so we'll get to see how things develop, how the crews respond from one piece to another. As we already said, that's a really interesting part of these fixtures. I guess, Grace, we've not really talked about predictions, I guess, for any of the races so far, but just whilst we've got a bit of time, I guess it would be interesting to hear your take on, sort of on the cusp of the Dutch national team squad versus a Cambridge crew of this standard. Who do we think is going to come out on top?
It's a really hard one, because I think the Dutch, they're obviously going to be a very good crew, but equally I think they've had one or two rows on the tideway, and the experience of knowing where to put your crew I think is huge, and I think Cambridge having that sort of upper hand and that knowledge of this actual body of water might be enough to sort of bring it closer. It's going to be tough, but then it is a nice day, so maybe that's not going to play too much into the favour. I think it'll be a tough ask, but yeah, I think Cambridge's knowledge of the water and the fact that maybe the Dutch crew is coming off a pretty intense block of trials and singles might tilt it slightly more towards the Cambridge men, but it's a hard one to pick, because I think they've just got such different strengths, so I guess it'll be who can draw on their strengths and actually utilise them most for today's racing situation.
Yeah, it's...
I really sat on the fence now.
Yeah, no, quite rightly so, though. And that's the beauty of these quite unknown quantities, right? Like, it's not like we've got the crews like we did last year that were stacked with a lot of results that were on paper, a lot of Olympians, a lot of national team rowers where you could cross-compare and sort of make a really, I guess... what's the word I'm looking for? You can make an informed judgment, I guess. Whereas this, both sides are fairly unknown, right? And there's been no opportunity for any comparison. So I think sitting on the fence, absolutely fine. And actually, just whilst we've got a moment, just taking a look at some of the results that we've had from this morning, we saw that first piece happen between the Cambridge women's second crew and UL second crew. It was Cambridge women's second crew that won by 2 lengths in the first piece. However, that was condensed all the way down to a third of a length in the second piece. Apparently an absolutely epic battle, and we said that, right? Learnings and turnarounds that obviously happened there for the second UL crew, who managed to close the gap right down. What a great race.
Yeah, so I think that really paints how important these fixtures are for just great racing on the day, but also long term, like how much you can learn and flip the result around. But then in saying that, you're going to turn up on the boat race day and you're not going to have an opportunity to learn from your mistakes from racing Cambridge or Oxford for the first time. So they've got to really use these lessons learned from here and sort of compile them all together to make the ultimate race on March 26 and say, we've learnt we can't be too complacent out of the start, or we can't go too hard out of the start. It's there's a lot to take in, and the season goes by so quickly that it's a real, you've just got to go. You can't muck around. You've got to learn and move, I think.
Yeah, you're so right. There's finite opportunities that you can count on two hands, that you get the opportunity to race a cruise side by side, correct the mistakes or take learnings, not even maybe mistakes, but things that are going well, right? Like learn when something is going well, to take it on, remember what that feels like, and then to put it into race day. Because we always talk about, as rowers, or certainly a lot of people talk about as rowers, that your racing should feel as good as a good day in training. You shouldn't be making tons of changes for race day, and so I think it's just as important to remember what's going well so that it feels like a training piece.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I think that was the advice I got given a lot in my rowing career. When things are going well, I think it's very easy to just enjoy that and sort of roll with that. And then when things start not going so well, you can go, how do I fix it? How do I get back to that? And I was told very early on that when things are going well, make sure you figure out why they're going well, so that if things then sort of start to fall off the wagon a little bit, you have something to be like, actually, when it was going well, it was because we were ticking this box and doing this technically and doing this, and you have something to go back to, and rather than just being like, no, we're just searching and we didn't really nail down what it was that made us good. We can definitely get caught up in sort of focusing on the negatives quite a bit, rather than being like, why are we good? Because it's weirdly hard to articulate sometimes.
Totally. And again, we'll watch this piece unfold. We're lining up now with these two crews. We've got the Dutch on the left hand side of your picture, Cambridge on the right, and both coxes there with their hands in the air, and that will signify that we're just needing to wait. That's the umpire, Tony Reynolds, there, just ensuring he's happy, but Jasper Parrish still not quite satisfied with the line, and Sarah Calf as well sticks her hand back up in the air.
And you can really see the roll on the water in their starts, so they're going to be sitting there a little bit unsteady, and you want to make sure that you're really locked in on that first stroke to counteract this and not wash out, because then it's very hard to get your start sequence going if you lose those sort of first few strokes.
You can really see the bounce there from, that we've had several races go past so far. All of the wash, it bounces between the walls, especially here in Putney. I'm sure you felt that, Grace, right? On boat race day, when there's so many boats, press launches, filming crews, it creates a lot of bounce.
It creates a lot of bounce, and I think just the nature of the river, both crews seem to manage pretty well out of the start with all that bounce, though.
What a lovely start there from Cambridge University on the right-hand side. Very punchy, very together. Maybe just, in these kind of 5th to 10th strokes, washing out a little bit. The Dutch now starting to power back. But that was very clean off the start for both crews.
It was very clean off the start. And as we said, it's very rolly. So I think they would have been making a conscious effort to do that. These crews look to be staying pretty close together, and Cambridge will be wanting to come in as close as possible without getting dangerously close, to make sure that they're staying in the fastest bit of the stream and they're not getting caught out on that slightly slower water. But it seems a relatively even start, with Cambridge potentially just taking a slight lead.
Very even, although just as you said that, Grace, they came past us here in London Rowing Club, and it looked like the Dutch had really taken 2 or 3 strokes to send, and they've pulled right back up level.
So it's a lot happened in the first few hundred metres, but no crew seems to want to be getting left behind out of the start, because I think in a piece this short, in men's 8s, it's very hard to come back.
It looks to me, and I'll have a check in a minute, that Cambridge underrating the Dutch. Confident to sit at their lower rate, trying to stick to their race plan, not be rattled by the fact that the Dutch are a little bit higher, and a really fierce pace being set by Peter van Veen and Eli Brouwer. They raced the pair at the Lucerne World Cup last year, so again another experienced stern pair, much like we were saying Ollie Parish and Luca Ferrero, also a pair from last season at the under-23, so we've got two sort of experienced pair combinations in that stern pairing.
Yeah, and they've both had international experience and know how to cope with the pressure and know what it's like, and I think they'll be able to both hold their nerve, so it sort of evens out those advantages. But yeah, I wonder if the Dutch can be slightly higher beat if they've just come off weeks of trialling. You might be able to sort of tick that rating along a little bit more.
And like we're saying, there's a bit of excitement here for the Dutch, right? They've jumped into this 8. They've got like 2 races to make the most of it before they go back into their singles, and they've got the sort of nerve-wracking nature of the trials and finding out, next week they are going to really take everything they can. So I don't know whether this is kind of excitement that's driving them to be leading at this point. And oh look, this is wonderful stuff here. We've got classic boat race cross oars, and very well navigated for everyone to keep hold there.
Very well navigated. I was like, that could be a disastrous one, but it looked like Cambridge came out of that relatively well, and maybe they've done a few more clash practices than the Dutch. I don't expect the Dutch anticipate going around clashing oars with other crews as much as probably Cambridge does, but it seemed like that didn't rattle Cambridge at all, and they managed to push on, well, maybe keep a really solid rhythm throughout that very close call.
A little glance there from the 6th seat of the Dutch 8. Witse Moreau was just curious to see where Cambridge were. And this is this very slight bend that favours the Middlesex crew, so Cambridge in this instance. So trying to, push a bit of distance between the bow balls, capitalise on that. If they've got, half a length, 3/4 of a length before the bend starts to favour the Dutch, who are on screen now, that's all for the better, and less work that they have to focus on catching up or holding off.
Yeah, I think they'll be wanting to really, really utilise that now to get their advantage as much as possible before it switches over. And you can still see it's pretty lumpy and bumpy here, so both crews are having to deal with that as well. But both crews look like they've come onto a pretty solid rhythm. Cambridge is looking relatively relaxed, and it looks like they've got a good amount of time to get forward, to place the blade. They're not in a rush, and it looks like a pretty solid rhythm throughout the whole entire boat.
Yeah, Ollie Parish in the stroke seat for Cambridge. It was stroking one of the trial 8s in December, so certainly a favoured athlete for that stroke position, and certainly it's quite well defined. Usually, Grace, you kind of either got it or you don't in the stroke seat, right? And he's certainly somebody that has delivered in that seat of setting a rhythm, and they look very stable. If you look at their shoulder position, you can see the platform of the boat, despite it being lumpy and bumpy, they're sitting really well on top of it.
Yeah, and they don't look like they're wasting any energy. They're not throwing the heads round, they're not throwing the bodies round. It looks like they are doing everything very down low in the boat, which is very efficient. Like they're not losing anything. They're not disrupting the boat in any way. And honestly, you want that. You don't want to be wasting any of the energy that you are putting in. You want it all to go into boat speed, and they seem to be doing that well. And to be fair, the Dutch look like that as well. They look pretty flat, although they're catching a few waves potentially, and that might be part of the dirty water that's coming down from the Cambridge puddles as well. But a few dirty strokes here and there.
Yeah, and like you say, it's when you've not been in that unit, when you get hit by a few kind of nasty bits of water, you're less experienced as a crew on how to set yourself back up again for the next stroke and focusing on what comes next. It's more about focusing on correcting yourself in the moment, which is tricky to do.
It is tricky to do, and they would have had less time to set up their boat. It'll be unfamiliar boat, unfamiliar oars, so they've got a few other things to navigate. So I think when the water gets a little bit choppier, maybe they at a little bit of a disadvantage of how to deal with that, whereas I think Cambridge will be well trained for this, well used to it, well practiced, and look like they're almost able to stay on top of the water a little bit more than the Dutch team.
And you can really see the trail of puddles coming back from the Cambridge crew, adding to that dirty water that the Dutch are having to deal with. But you can also see how Jasper Parrish is starting to drift across, right? You can see the trail of where he's just got enough room to sort of push into the water that is more favourable on the inside of the bend. And Hammersmith Bridge, well within grasp now. And I think the amount of space that Cambridge have got, that they've managed to accumulate, has given them a lot of space to relax. The blades are being placed so well together. There's no chasing, there's no kind of rush. Very patient, and they're able to focus on what they're doing.
Yeah, it looks like they're just quite a bit cleaner than the Dutch crew at the moment. It doesn't look like as much water is coming up the shafts of the oar. They're not hitting as many times. So I think them being out in front, the whole crew can see where their competition is. They can all relax, can all breathe, and it's like a steady walk away. I think they're confident that their base speed at the moment is quicker. And they've managed to sort of minimise the effect of this outside corner because they've got a decent enough lead and they know they're onto the final sort of few minutes. So I think they can be very happy with how it's going. And I mean, there's nothing more satisfying than being able to sit out in front of a crew and sort of watch them behind you. And it's a tough job when you're coming in second out of a 2-boat race when you can't see where the other crew is. It's difficult.
Yeah, a really difficult job here for the Dutch to jump in and go up against this very tidy unit from Cambridge University. And you can see there on the screen Peter van Veen and Eli Brouwer, as we discussed before, that stern pairing that know each other so well, but just not quite managing to achieve the same results from their rhythm as Cambridge are through this kind of middle race pace part of the course. And again, this is lovely for Cambridge to have this distance, but what do we think they're learning from it here, Grace?
Yeah, I think you've got to really take your moments here to be like, what are we doing really well to get us out this far in front, and how does it feel when they've obviously still got pressure on them, there's a crew behind them, but they've got a decent enough gap that they can relax and breathe. So it's like, how do you recreate that if there's a crew right next to you? So I think they need to be taking in what they're doing, what their movement is, so that if there was a crew closer, they don't automatically tense up, things don't change, the rhythm doesn't change. Like, this is obviously working very well for them. I'm like, cement this and figure out what are we doing to make it look easy, make it look comfortable, and on a day where maybe it's a slightly closer race, how do we make sure we find this rhythm again?
Well, that will be the tail end of this piece here for Cambridge within sight. The Dutch a few lengths back here, and I think that was all in that kind of transition into race pace, right? It was very close off the start, lots of confidence from the Dutch, like we were saying, lots of excitement from them. I think, maybe if I was looking at it, perhaps a little bit less excitement off the start for the Dutch, a little bit more patience, a little bit more kind of, focus on what they can do through the middle part of the race. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes you've got to be like, let's play to our strengths. And maybe it was a game plan of being like, let's just go out and race the other crew's race and maybe go slightly too much. So, I mean, you've got nothing to lose in the second race. Try something new, see how that works, and you can decide what works out better for you, because this is a great learning moment for them as well. They were to take this back into their training, and if they race this 8 anywhere else, it's going to be hugely beneficial to try and figure out how to either minimise the gap or completely turn it around.
It's going to be, again, something to consider for this second piece. These guys must be so exhausted, right, having come off the back of a set of trials where you've got to be on your A game. They're all trying to get those very valuable seats in the senior team, of which there aren't very many in the Dutch side, right? They had a great performance at the World Championships last year. These athletes are all trying to pry open what is a very closed door into that very well set up team that picked up a heap of medals last year, and they really would have pushed themselves hard. So maybe no surprise to see that might have had a bit of an impact on how they're performing.
Yeah, and I think not only obviously the physical stress that comes along with trials, but like the mental stress really takes it out of you. So I think they'll be mentally and physically exhausted. But hopefully still enjoyed this race, and it'll be interesting to see their tactics going into the next one. But yeah, as you said, the Dutch team has had incredibly strong performances at the last World Champs, so to be trying to break into that team is no easy ask. So yeah, they've got their work cut out for them, and I think that's probably where all their time and energy's gone for the last few weeks, and hopefully this is a nice sort of take your mind off it, just do some fun racing and enjoy some river racing.
And those in the Cambridge crews, they will also be looking towards the GB trials for the under 23s and beyond. They're taking place next weekend in Boston, Lincolnshire. So I'm sure those that are interested in going to the under 23 World Championships will have that on their mind after this fixture. But again, all about timing, cycles, what you prioritise. With the boat race, there is such a clear goal, there is such a clear timeline that you don't have to think about anything else really. Everything else is second priority, whereas for this Dutch team there'll be a lot else going on with their seasons right now.
Yeah, and I think the boat race is at a time of the year where it really allows you to do other things afterwards as well, and sort of you think towards the boat race, you achieve that, and then you can start thinking about 23 selections and other stuff alongside of that, and sort of tick off one box at a time, which is nice, and these fixtures are very much a huge part of that, and you can see all this where they came very, very close together.
But that would have been so stressful, but really enjoyable to come across from the Netherlands and to get that, that proper boat race experience, right? Like when you think about iconic images from the boat race and what the spectators love, what we love to see, it's that drama, it's that little bit of jeopardy that's at stake, right? The thought that something might happen. They've really got the full experience there.
Yeah, and that's what you want. You want the excitement, the everything that you could kind of want to experience. And as you say, like in 2K racing, you don't get that. You know what's going to happen, and river racing, that's the beauty of it. You're fighting off clashes, you're having to pick a line. There's so much to think about that it's actually just a really fun way to race, and it lets you think about different things, and you have to manage and see who can come out on top on the day. So yeah, they got the near clashes, they got a good start, they've got everything, I think.
We've got a few moments for them to recuperate, to gather their breath back, to have that little chat about what do we do next time, what is it that we're going to focus on, and we sort of turned it on its head, I guess, Grace, because the Dutch jumped out there and really fought in those first few 100 metres to stay on terms. I think when you've got the finish line, it'll be the end where we'll see some of that like sparky, throw the kitchen sink, expend all the energy, last chance saloon, last chance opportunity. So we might see some fireworks in the final few 100 metres with this one.
Yeah, it'll be exciting, and it looked like Cambridge very much stayed on their rhythm the whole way, so it'll be interesting to see how they can transfer that up in rate and take that through into their wine, because often as you're working through the season you're sort of ticking off different parts of your race plan, so I reckon maybe they've been really working on that base speed, so it'll be interesting to see how they can take it up, and it's always an exciting part of the race to watch, and that might be where the Dutch can really come into their own, because now they've got nothing to lose, and as you say, just really throw the kitchen sink at it and see what happens.
Yeah, and again, we've got the sailors out enjoying the Thames, the London skyline, looking glorious here on this Sunday afternoon. And I mean, there must be a bit of a breeze for the sailing club to be out. It's not flat calm out there.
Well, that's what I'd always think when the sailboats are out. My heart would sink a little bit, and I'd be like, well, if you can be out, I don't know if we should be out. But maybe it's that perfect conditions where it's suited to both at the moment. But yeah, when it's really rough, I'm like, you guys can have this water, we'll just head back in.
No, they're probably looking at this going, perfect, make it a bit more windy. This is exactly what we're after. But no, I think maybe something else for them to navigate, perhaps, actually, because like we said, the river does not close on Fixtures Day, which makes it just that little bit more exciting, right, to think what could be around the corner.
Yeah, sometimes I honestly didn't mind a bit of wash. Kind of takes your mind off things for a few strokes, and you might get, say, 10 strokes where you're like, okay, just concentrate really hard on this, and then you're like, oh, that killed 100 metres or so, and sort of made your mind wander a little bit. But yeah, I think these sailboats can't probably move all that quickly, so hopefully we don't have any collisions in this one.
Grace, for you, when you were racing and training for this race, was there a particular part of the course that you found the most challenging, and conversely, was there a sort of particular bit that you really enjoyed about racing on the Tideway?
I think the bit that I found the most challenging was probably the bit that they're about to do in the second piece, that last maybe K or so, when it's quite a big bend, and that's when the fatigue is really setting in. And I always just remember you can really feel when the coxswain is turning, and it's tough on the body when you're like, I'm on edge, but like we're navigating this bend and we're trying to go up in rate, and it just sort of seems like a portion of the race where everything is happening at once. And I was always just very aware, if you're coming down to a very close race and it's that last little bit, there's a lot to think about. It's a lot to manage when you're so tired and you're really holding on to the finish line. So I would almost kind of not dread that bit, but I was just always very aware of that bit. And I know in our crew we had a real focus on, as you're coming into that bit, to stay relaxed and not tense up, because as soon as you start to tense up, that's when you can knock your blade or make an error, and it's very easy. And then the bit I probably enjoyed most was probably the start to Hammersmith Bridge. Although sometimes it would always feel a little bit longer than I thought it should, but I think it's just the most exciting bit, and it's the bit we would train on the most, so I feel like I knew it the best. It's a hard course to get your head around, and we'd always talk about all these landmarks on the way, but it's hard to even, like, we talk about the blue doors, and it took me so many sessions to find the blue doors. So it's hard to get your head around a completely new body of water, but I was like, okay, I've really memorised the first bit to Hammersmith Bridge. So I think I almost liked that the best.
And that's, again, we talked about the start being really stressful, so it's really interesting to hear that you really enjoyed that despite the stress of that first stroke being, on national television, on international television, right? It's watched around the world by so many, but yeah, still your favourite part.
Yeah, I think I would almost probably actually caveat and say minus the first couple of strokes, because the first few strokes are stressful, and it's one of those sort of situations you've trained for this for months, and in the back of your mind you're like, I don't want it to be over in the first few strokes if something goes wrong. It would just be devastating, and it's so technical, and I remember we practiced it so many times that by the time I was like, okay, I'm sure I've got this, but it was still like a bit of a sigh of relief on the actual boat race day when we were probably 10 or 15 strokes in. I was like, okay, we're away, it was clean, we're fine. But I think also it's one of those things that you train so much for it. I got to the point where I was like, I just want to get this race started because I want to see how we're going to go. We're just as an unknown as everyone else, so you don't know if you're going to be faster or slower than the other crew. And when you feel really ready to race, and I felt like we were, I was like, I just want to get out there to be like, what's the result going to be? Like, how are we going to go? Are we going to put like a really good race forward? And you're just like, I want it to happen.
And the other part that will add into this, so you said there's that kind of mystery of what the other crew is doing, there's the landmarks, there's counting it down, there's having your course, but also, on boat race day there are thousands and thousands of people. It is one of the busiest spectator events in London that is kind of out publicly. You can come and watch for free. Do you get that sense that lots of people are on the banks when you're out there on the water? Do you feel the support and the crowds?
You really do, and I think that was something that I did actually really try to take in as well, because I've raced at so many different types of regattas, and there's people there watching and all of that, but I think the boat race is just so many more spectators, and it wasn't something that I really wanted to shy away from and try and ignore, because it's kind of the fun part of the boat race, and it's what makes it so special, that I was like, take it in, enjoy it. And I guess we'd spent our whole year training at Cambridge, and everyone had watched us go after all the trainings and really got on board with the whole boat race event, and people that had never taken any notice of rowing before were so supportive of it that it felt like you just had so many people there to for so many different reasons. People that love rowing, people that had never really heard of it before, but it kind of brings a whole city together, which is really cool. But yeah, it's definitely on a different level of spectators than any other regatta I've been to.
And very different, you obviously were at the Tokyo Olympics, and even for me, I felt very lucky to be able to be there commentating, but very odd experience commentating to a handful of journalists. Like just complete chalk and cheese, right? When it's like there was no crowd whatsoever and you're kind of rowing into the void of silence at an Olympic Games. It must have been a hugely different experience.
It was so different, and I think just not only having no spectators, but then you also didn't get to share it with your family and friends who, I mean, it's such a cool opportunity for them to be there and watch and enjoy the moment as well, but we missed all that. So it was like chalk and cheese, and it was a really weird environment that you're surrounded by the volunteers, and minus that there's no one else. And I guess the stands had people from the actual teams in it, but it's very, very quiet, and it felt like almost like a hidden away regatta. And obviously everyone can watch on TV and whatnot, but yeah, I feel like going from that to the boat race, it was like I don't think I could have gone from more extremes. But then on the flip side, I was like, we got to the point where it was like, as long as the Olympics go ahead, I was like, I'll take it in any sort of capacity. Sad no spectators, but I think we felt privileged enough and honoured enough that they could run it. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it definitely wasn't ideal.
And you raced both events. Obviously the boat race is 8, but you raced in the 8 at the Olympics as well as the pair. What are the differences, I guess, between what you were preparing for a 2K flat water Olympic Games and this quite unusual and unique event that takes place here in the UK?
I think for me one of the main differences was that in a 2K race in an 8, we were never wanting to do anything that was out of our ordinary. Like, we would never want to go above our pace halfway through the race, because we were like, we know our race plan, this is how we're going to get the best out of us, and we're confident in that. Whereas in the boat race, I think you've got to be willing to do things at certain points of the race that you may not want to do. You may want to go up a few points in rate halfway through for a minute burst, whereas in a 2K race I would never want to do that. But you've just got to be willing to respond to the other crew more in a boat race sort of scenario. You're not so focused obviously you're focused internally on your own rhythm and all that, but you've got to have an external focus as well, whereas I feel like that is less important in a 2K race where there's no like nothing can affect you.
And we're going to jump now into watching these crews do exactly as you've described, Grace. Having to focus somewhat on what's going on around them, and we're now going to take a look at what the response has been. We've switched stations, so again, another factor to consider. It's not going to be exactly the same, and this will give Cambridge the initial advantage, with the Dutch having to hold on from the outside, so that's going to change their perspective completely.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how both crews approach this, and see if they change their tactics based on the past race, or if they're gonna, Cambridge going to be confident in that and want to go out the same. I think they'll be able to take away a lot, that they were able to kind of hold that initial power and strength from the Dutch crew and then slowly move away. But it looks like we've got a good, exciting start.
Yeah, I can even hear the instruction there coming from Tony Reynolds. You can see the flag waving in front of our camera, because right off the start, straight into one another, really trying to go at that one bit of water that they both want. And if you can hear the warning, and I think it's for the Dutch crew. You can see there Tony Reynolds in the high vis, pointing his flag at the Dutch crew to move out.
Yeah, and I guess the Dutch crew's going to try and be brave and cut in as much as possible to minimise the amount of extra distance they need to roll around the outside, but I think they've slightly come in too far.
Yeah, and you can see here the response. That I think actually Cambridge have maybe shuffled slightly. Again, whether that's something that Jasper will have wanted to do, or again, like you say, having to respond to those external factors and weigh it up. Is it more important for me to be on my line or for me to stay out of trouble from an impending clash?
Yeah, because it's an interesting one. Like, you can't just hold your line even if you're in the right. It might be more beneficial to move and put your crew in a better position, but it's that sort of combination of being stubborn enough to find the best possible outcome for your crew in that very moment, and have to have the clear foresight to be doing that, to be coxing your crew at the same time, to be watching the rate, to be making sure you push onto rhythm. There's a lot for them to think about, and stay very calm and not show any sort of stress or panic to their crew as well.
Well, this is still quite close, still overlap between these two crews, and the Dutch looking quite short, I would say, in comparison to Cambridge. They're very upright at the front end, and they've not quite got the run and the length that Cambridge have got.
No, it looks like Cambridge potentially has a little bit more like drive and swing in their stroke, and might be levering the boat a little bit more, and that might sort of just be coming from the confidence that they've had from that first piece, that they're like, we've got a good base rhythm, let's back it. Whereas I think the Dutch would have gone into this race being like, we need to do something different. So that sort of promotes a little bit of panic, or a little bit of this sense of urgency that maybe they're not allowing to get out that extra wheel turn, and missing that tiny bit of free speed. That it's a hard one to think. Like, maybe a little bit more patience will give you speed, but then when you're in this sort of situation, it's takes a lot of willpower to say, let's give it more time, we'll go faster.
Yeah, the Dutch up at sort of 36, 37 strokes a minute, and we'll take a look in just a second at Cambridge, who I suspect much lower. Yeah, so Cambridge actually making 36 look a lot more efficient. So there you go, both crews rating about the same, but you could never tell that. But look, the Dutch, whatever it is that they've done, maybe this is how they know they can get that sort of raw speed, is just purely staying really upright and really dynamic.
Well, I think it's kind of what we talked about before. This is when it's maybe a little bit interesting to see how you, I don't know, nice rowing doesn't necessarily push you up. Like, it might not look as pretty, but if you can get on there, and this kind of seems like the Dutch is doing, it looks like they're taking distance with every stroke, and maybe they were like, let's just go out there, row hard and see where we can go, because we've got nothing to lose, and they managed to hold on to that initial bend, and now it's going to come into their favour. So it's going to be interesting to see how Cambridge can respond to this.
I think arguably the Dutch are pulling level, just looking at the blades, fairly well sort of matched across the boats, and even in fact there was a little glide from them that I think shoved them into contention for the lead, and this bend will certainly be helping, and as we now move underneath, I think the Dutch have taken the lead here, Grace.
They have, and I think they've come in with a different game plan, and this is going to be, as we talked about before, Cambridge was out in front in the last race. They were able to relax, make it look easy, and this is when the pressure's on them. So how are they going to respond to a crew that's been like, we're going to throw the kitchen sink at this one, we're going to see what we can do? And they seem to have a real momentum shift, and I don't know if maybe they caught Cambridge off guard. Cambridge won the last one quite convincingly, and maybe they went into it a little bit complacent, and the Dutch have really, really lulled them into a false sense of security, potentially.
And there's some real drive there coming from Sarah Kalf in the coxswain seat, who was really pushed them hard. You can see her movement with her calls, and fair play, that, you know, almost a length now up, driven by some really aggressive moves there. And, you know, again, maybe the other thing to take into account is, you know, if they've been doing lots of trialing, lots of intensity work, they're a bit more prepared for that second piece, you know, dealing with that lactic acid, dealing with the feeling of fatigue. That's all part and parcel of going through that trials process. So just being that little bit more used to it and being comfortable with it might be giving them a bit of an advantage despite them being tired.
Yeah, because it's like this, because similar to a seat racing type situation, you're doing repeated reps, so maybe they are, and they're just like, actually, we know what this pain feels like, we can grin and bear it and make the most of it. Like, this is our advantage, and we're really going to take it. And they definitely learnt from the first piece, and it's almost flipped the result right round. And it's going to be interesting to see if Cambridge can respond and start to take the rate up or the speed up. And I mean, they're still holding on in there, but they do have to come around the outside if they want to win this piece.
Yeah, it's a bit like being on an athletics track, isn't it? Being on the outside of the bend. That's exactly what Cambridge are going to have to do now to try and pull back. They've got about 3/4 of a length, maybe slightly more, and we can see the vision of the finish there of the bridge on the horizon. That's beyond the finish, and so the Dutch looking with every single stroke more and more likely to take the victory in this one, but Cambridge will have to jump on this opportunity to practice this finish.
Yeah, this is potentially a perfect situation for Cambridge to try. They're under a lot of pressure now. They've got to do something pretty amazing to take the win on this, and to see what they can do and take some notes. But you can see that some of the boys in the Cambridge crew are starting to turn around and look. The stress is slightly creeping in, and they're under a lot more pressure, and the Dutch just seem to be walking away like they're a different crew this time.
Look at the Dutch now. They just, as you say, now they've got the space. This is exactly what happened. It's almost an overturn of exactly what Cambridge did in the first piece. They look so relaxed. They're sort of floating now that they've got the lead, and possibly rowing even better than they were before, and it just required that little bit of confidence for them to be in this position.
Yeah, it shows what being out in front can do. They seem to have, now they've look relaxed, they look like they've got their time, whereas the Cambridge crew is starting to turn around, heads are going, it's starting to look a bit panicky. So it was an impressive turnaround from the Dutch crew, and I think really took the lessons from the first one and were determined not to make it look like that for the second one.
Well done both crews, good racing. Clare and Jasper, thank you very much.
There we go. Thanks from the Umpire team, and what a race. I mean, I think that is a perfect kind of summary of how much you can learn from a day like today, and also that it's, you know, not necessarily on paper a result can stand. That was a big set of difference, as I say, almost exactly on its head from one piece to another.
Yeah, it was a huge turnaround. I think there was a very interesting race to watch play out, and I think I didn't expect a crew to be able to turn it around that much in one, but it just seemed like once they got a little bit of momentum, they were just away. And maybe the first piece they were just getting used to the water, getting used to all of that, but like they looked like a different crew. In the first piece they seemed to be catching a lot of water, and it looked like it was like a little bit messy, whereas in the second piece the Dutch crew looked cleaner, looked more relaxed, and just looked like they were handling it all a lot better.
And, you know, we must acknowledge that we did say earlier, this top bit of the course is a lot calmer, you know, is a lot calmer than that stretch on the run up to Hammersmith Bridge. So I think we find this a lot, even at international level, right, is the crews that are, you know, let's take, for example, Ollie Zeidler in the single is the best example you can give, right, who can win a race by lengths and lengths if it's nice, pan, flat, calm water. But the second there's any kind of turbulence or waves, like a different crew, right? And that's exactly what's happened here.
Yeah, it's some crews can handle rough water and some can't, and I think that's where you really want to be a well-rounded crew, that you're not going to turn up on the race day and be praying for certain conditions. You want to turn up and be like, yeah, I can handle a rough tail or a rough head or flat water. you don't want to be reliant on the weather determining your future, and some crews are, which is it's a gamble whether you're going to get the right conditions. So yeah, I think they looked like they could handle the flat water a lot better, which interesting because the Dutch often row in quite rough water. A lot of the courses are pretty windy there. So I thought they would really thrive in the chop.
Well, I mean, but I think that's the more important way round for it to be, right? Cambridge knowing they can handle, because they might have to do that, whereas the Dutch, this is a bit of sort of testing for them, a little bit of fun, coming across and racing. It's, not quite as detrimental for them if they can't handle the tideway conditions ever again. They might not even ever come back ever again, right? So, I think it's important that it was that way round, that Cambridge thrived in the choppier conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to be honest, obviously you want to win both races, but that was good. I think that in the long run, that's good for Cambridge. They'll learn. They've taken a lot from it, probably a win and a loss, and will be able to move forward from that.
Well, we've learned a lot today. Thank you so much for joining us here. I've been Camilla Hadland-Horrocks with Grace Prendergast, taking you through all of the Cambridge fixtures. And join us again. Well, not us. You'll be joined by the wonderful Martin Cross and Jess Eddy for the next fixture that will be streamed live on Sunday, the 12th of March. And you'll get to see a bit of action from OUBC this time around. So make sure that you're back on the tideway. Hopefully, fingers crossed, just as nice conditions, just as great a racing. And thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
This is a full body workout, live from the water, engaging your arms, legs, core and glutes. This is cardio and strength training. This is Hydro. Try today with a 30-day risk-free trial. Shop now at hydro.co.uk.
Well, the river is in a gentle humour today. This may be close as well.
The hours, the weeks, the months of preparation.
It's frantic stuff. A release of all that waiting and all that adrenaline now. All the waiting almost over. And the next 17 minutes or so will decide how the story ends.